There's a lot of people there. And he's like, hey, you remember Mark and Marty Howe? I'm like, yes, of course. And and Mike. And I'm like, oh, yeah. So there was a couple of sponsors there. So he's sitting, I'm standing up, just like going around the table. And I just figured Mike was, I'm like, oh, your name's Mike too, huh? Hey, nice to meet you, this and that. I thought he was like a major sponsor or something, like a car dealer or something like that.
Mike Keenan.
I didn't realize. Then I sat down at the end of the table and I'm kind of looking. He's at the far end. And I'm like, wait a second. That's Mike Keenan. So I was going to go like, hey, I'm sorry. I can't really see in here. But then he was already asleep right at the table. So I didn't have a chance to apologize to him until yesterday. Oh, he was.
Come on.
Like this.
Welcome back to another edition of the Clearing the Crease podcast, powered by BODOG. We're your line mates, Commie, Razors, CBall, and what's happening, everybody? Here we go. We are inching closer and closer to the Stanley Cup final, down to 4, and by the time this finally drops, there might be down to even 3 or 2 potentially. Razor, how's life in B-Town these days? It's been cold in the Northeast.
Oh my God, I've had the heat on. I've literally had the heat on in my house.
It's hockey
last
weather.
Week. Like the hockey weather, like dressed in hockey clothes to go to my daughter and son's lacrosse games over the last week. It's been awful. So needless to say, like I played golf Tuesday with a toque on, like bad stuff, really bad stuff.
And you're not even bald.
Huh?
And you're not even bald.
Nope. Legit, like it's awful. So we're trying to grind through that, get to June and finally start summer up here.
All right, Commie, on the flip side, your weekend looked like you were living the dream, and both Razor and I were jealous because it was a Flames alumni weekend. You were in Calgary. We talked about some of the adventures, including meeting a former guest of this show, the one, the only, Kurtis from Alberta.
Well, it's been a big weekend. I'm sitting here on the 7th floor of the Hyatt. It has been one since Thursday, since I got here. It's over now. Everybody's flown out. Thank God. It was fun. We played hockey, and it was at the Gordie Howe Cares. We have our Flames alumni golf tournament coming up on Thursday, but that's a different animal. It's not like this, but yeah, so there was like probably 40 guys that were, some of them live here, but a lot of them flew in. So basically it's been Saturday and Sunday was like hockey and getting after it. There's beers everywhere. And then, yeah, I came in here Thursday and met one of our former guests. So I went to have a beer with a buddy of mine quickly. And then I was going to meet like Scott Gomez and Matthew Barnaby and Wayne McBean and, both the Howes were there, Marty and Mark. And so I'm down in, it's called the Wednesday Room, just down the road here. And it's a little bit dark down there. Mike Keenan was there too. Mike, I felt so bad. Well, I didn't really feel that bad. I did for like a second. Everybody's already sat down. It's kind of dark. I'm like, hey guys, good to see you. Hey, what's going on? What's up, Barney? Barney hasn't changed. What's up, Gomer? Blah, blah, blah. And Wayne's like, hey, everybody here? I'm like, yeah, I mean, I think so, kind of, whatever. But there's a lot of people there. And he's like, hey, you remember Mark and Marty Howe? I'm like, yes, of course. And Mike. And I'm like, oh, yeah. So there was a couple of sponsors there. So he's sitting, I'm standing up, just like going around the table. And I just figured Mike was, I'm like, oh, your name's Mike too, huh? Hey, nice to meet you, this and that. I thought he was like a major sponsor or something, like a car dealer or something like that.
Mike Keenan.
I didn't realize. Then I sat down at the end of the table and I'm kind of looking. He's at the far end. And I'm like, wait a second. That's Mike Keenan. So I was going to go like, hey, I'm sorry. I can't really see in here. But then he was already asleep right at the table. So I didn't have a chance to apologize to him until yesterday. Oh, he was.
Come on.
Like this. But anyways, part of the table, back to the point of the story, I'm sorry. There were sponsors there, and I'm sitting there, and then all of a sudden, hey, Mike. And I'm like, look. I'm like, hey. He goes, it's Kurtis. I'm like, Kurtis from Alberta. He was at the dinner. Oh, yeah. I start laughing. You know what? He was an incredibly nice guy. His boss was there. So, of course, I'm like, we all saw how much stuff he has in the basement and everything. I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm like, how much are you paying this guy? The guy's got $500,000 worth of Leaf gear in his basement. But it was funny. The
And
guy,
we should just quickly clarify. Curtis from Alberta. If you haven't heard the episodes from before, if you haven't familiar with him on social media, Curtis from Alberta is like one of the most diehard Leaf fans imaginable. He's got memorabilia. He's got basically the size of an NHL dressing room in his basement filled with gear. And so we've had him on as a guest in years past. And here you are running into this guy after all this time.
Yeah. So his boss was great. I found out. So Curtis, his wife is, I think, constantly pissed at him for buying all this gear. So it's to the point wherever he gets anything, he has to. He doesn't ship any of it to his house. He ships it to the dealership. So that's where all of his gear comes in. And I'm like, hey, I go, Curtis, that's. I get how you're thinking here, but I go, I'm pretty sure you're not fooling her. I mean, all she has to do is walk downstairs and see how much stuff you have down there. But anyways, everybody was having a few drinks. Curtis was a very nice guy. He wanted some pictures and stuff like that. And Gomez was giving it to him. Anyways, because this wasn't like this was just like us hanging out and having a few drinks or whatever. And anyways, I guess it was probably a great start to the weekend where one of the first people I ran into was Kurtis from Alberta.
I'm glad you brought. I have to say, I'm glad you brought up Gomez, and I'm glad you reconnected with him. One of our first guests on this show when we first launched this podcast back 3 years ago.
Yeah.
And you and Gomez had that story about when COVID first hit, one of the first virtual apps, use Zoom and Microsoft Teams. You guys were using House Party.
That's right.
Yeah. And you had sent the link to all these guys and telling stories, and some rando had just jumped on the conversation.
Yeah.
And
everybody
thought it was your
somebody else's buddy. I'm like, I didn't know how to work this thing. And yeah, everybody's telling, we're all drinking it.
I was walking the dog the other day listening to this, and I'm just dying remembering that story.
We didn't really get it until we could hear the guy. He was talking to there were other people in the room, and the guy's like, no, that's really Scott Gomez, this, that. And then that's when and we're all looking. I'm like, and we're texting on the side. I'm like, who is that? Whose buddy is that? It was just some dude. Anyways, he was blasted, and so hearing all these stories. Yeah.
Well done.
Anyways, it's always great to see going.
Well, we're glad you're still alive.
Thanks.
And let's stay in Alberta here, because the Edmonton Oilers now up 2-1 as we record this episode here in the Western Final up on Dallas. And you know what? Don't ask Connor McDavid, but your drinking game, the Darnell Nurse drinking game, sucks, because it turns out, guys, that the Oilers can play D.
They can. Darnell's been, I said it last time, but even, I didn't see, I've been busy this weekend or whatever, but the game was on. We got done playing our BS hockey. And so I was kind of paying attention a little bit. I mean, Darnell took a minus last night, but I mean, they won 6-1. It doesn't matter. But even I always just, for whatever reason, I end up watching Darnell. Darnell took the minus, but hey, he was on both of his feet. He just got scored on. It wasn't a big deal. It wasn't his fault, at all. Yeah, my Darnell drinking game is, if we were relying on that, we might as well quit drinking, because he's not going down anymore. And they're playing great. And I'm actually, the Oilers are obviously very popular in Alberta. There's no doubt about it. There's a lot of Oilers fans. There's a lot of Flames fans too. But I will say, I mean, we are in Calgary, but people are fired up. I got to say, when they were scoring, people were, maybe I shouldn't have been caught off guard. Usually when you're in Calgary, not everybody, but a lot of people hate the Oilers, but there were a lot of cheers going around, and people are definitely fired up.
They're Razor. I mean, this is you guys both like Stars. I mean, the series ain't over till it's over, but the Stars offense has completely dried up. Rantanen, 1 goal in the last 8 playoff games after the tear he had been on. But it's not just him. Sagan, Robertson. The list goes on. Matt Duchene, after a 30-goal season, has quieted down. Wyatt Johnson. Like, there's not a lot of offense right now from a really good Stars team.
No, they should be down 3-0. Edmonton should be up if it wasn't for those power play goals in game one, and Edmonton dominated that game too. So Edmonton's cooking. I thought Dallas was going to have that secondary scoring. I thought they were going to be deep enough. Of course, it's only 2-1, so it's much different than the other side where it's 3-0 and it hasn't even been close. But it's 2-1 and it really hasn't been that close. So Edmonton's impressive. Dallas, CBall, you said it. They need that secondary scoring. They need Johnson. They need Robertson. They need Duchesne. They need these guys to show up. Of course, Rantanen wasn't going to keep that pace up. Those guys, but when you only have one line, it's easy for Edmonton to defend right now. But it is really looking like a repeat of last season. It's a long way to go for Edmonton still, but it's really looking like an 08-09 situation where you had Detroit, Pittsburgh, ping pong back and forth. That should be the best scenario for the NHL. I'm sure that's what they're cheering for in the offices right now, to get McDavid back into the finals and see if he can pull it off. And I obviously, Commie, if Calgary's cheering for it, then the entire country of Canada is pulling for McDavid at this point. They look good.
Oh, did you want to add any to that, to Commie?
Sorry. I totally agree. I mean, I could fire in the "don't puck it up." I'll do that right now if you want.
Go ahead if you want.
What I've seen the last couple days here, and I got nothing against the Oilers. I'm from just outside of town, but I don't cheer for the Oilers, and I'm a Flames guy for sure. But after what I've been watching, obviously on the ice, and then sitting at the bar, and everybody's all fired up, I'm going to have to say Canada is definitely behind the Oilers. Don't puck this up. Like we just touched on, the series isn't over. Dallas has been getting grossly outplayed, but if they win the next game, it's 2-2, and they got 2 games at home. Like that series is definitely not over like the other one probably is. But don't puck it up, Edmonton. Canada's behind you, and everybody's fired up for sure.
Yeah, I think this sort of sense of cheering for a Canadian team, fair or foul, if there's one Canadian team left, and you need to think about the rivalries across the country. But I do think, based on what has happened over the last few months from a political climate standpoint, I think, to your point, I think people seem to be on board with really wanting to see the Cup, land back in Canada. I mean, it's been 32 years. And the other thing is, we're seeing a lot of marketing campaigns with commercials now, right? Like, talking about, hey, it's been this long, we're constantly reminded of it, that it's been since 1993 since a Canadian team has won. So anyway, I'm not entirely surprised that people in Calgary would actually have the audacity to cheer for the Oilers right now. So let me switch gears and over in the Eastern Conference Final right now. And once again, we're looking at a Carolina Hurricanes team that gets to the Final Four, and they're on the cusp of being swept as we record this, down 3-0. Just looking overwhelmed. There's a couple of different directions to go here. I want to let me hit this one first, because we have seen jobs that have been impacted by playoff failure in the Stanley Cup playoffs, right? Rob Blake lost his gig after another Kings exit to the Edmonton Oilers. We saw Brendan Shanahan not having his contract renewed, or essentially dropped by the Toronto Maple Leafs as the president after 11 years in Toronto. Maybe this is a tough one for you, Commie, but do you think the Canes, or would they consider a change behind the bench if they get swept again? I mean, Rod Brind'Amour this is a team that has been built to win now the last 5 years. I love Rod Brind'Amour, and I think any team would be lucky to have a team constantly getting back to the Final Four, but in a situation like this, would the Canes dare do something different if they go down again?
I'll preface first.
Okay.
I'll let Commie go, because Rod's friend of the show again. Another one of our former guests. Where you Apple Podcasts, Spotify, everywhere you can listen to the podcast. Go back, do that. Sponsored and powered by BODOG. Make sure you do that and listen to the Rod Brind'Amour interview, because he was awesome with us telling Commie stories.
And all episodes, by the way, now on Spotify and Apple. So
go get
check
them.
those out.
Yes.
Easy.
But he could go 0-12 since 2019 in the conference finals here, and that's a problem. I think it seems like a lot. They just signed him to a long-term contract. There was talk of this the last 2 playoff exits with Rod. I think Carolina has run into a juggernaut in the Florida Panthers. I think this year more than any is just more about Florida and what they are. They finally got to their game. The Leafs had them on the ropes, but it was because there's a little smoke and mirrors there. Bobrovsky wasn't good in the first 2 games. Florida's got to their game, and they're there. There's a few things Carolina can do. We talk, and Commie, I'm going to let you talk about, but the man-on-man defense, there can be tweaks in how Rod coaches.
Yeah.
I think we're finally, like, that might be it for that, because that's what's getting them in trouble here in a major way. They just can't get into games, and Florida's using their forecheck, and that man-on-man is just really hard to keep up with. So I think Rod's going to have to change or tweak his defensive zone a little bit, but more so than anything is that they have to change their roster construction a little bit. They need to get a little tougher, a little harder. Their back end is I love Jacob Slavin. I love Brent Burns, but there's not a lot of sandpaper back there, especially with Chatfield out. You got Goss Despair scared to go at Brad Marchand. They're turning. It's just not a good matchup for them. It just really isn't. Toronto might have been a better matchup. Florida isn't. Florida's not a good matchup for anyone. But so long story short is we love Rod. I think he's going to have to tweak kind of the way he looks at the game and does that. But I don't see a firing. I just see a little bit of a different mindset down there.
Shake it up kind of thing.
Yeah. I mean, we were talking about this the last couple of days, hanging out with
man on man too, right?
Yeah, the man on man. And I cannot believe the Canes have been one of the more successful franchises over the last 20 years. I mean, they've been really good. They haven't won since 2006, but they've been making the playoffs a ton. And this is the 4th time to the conference finals since. I cannot believe the last time they won a conference final game, I opened up the scoring. Like that to me is crazy. The last time they won was
it is crazy.
Game 7 against Buffalo, and I scored the first goal, and they haven't won one since, which is crazy.
So good.
And I'm not just saying, obviously, I guess I would never rip on Rod because I think the world of him. He loves us. He came out of but he has to make some adjustments. There's no way that they would fire him. Like Rod Brind'Amour, especially when you're down there, in Carolina, if you think somebody says Carolina Hurricanes hockey, the first person they're thinking of is Rod Brind'Amour. He's the face. I mean, honestly, he's probably the face of the franchise. He's done an excellent job, but that he like I said, I'm not questioning Rod Brind'Amour. I never will, but that man-on-man defense is a problem.
Okay. Explain this to someone who doesn't play to that level. What's the difficulty of playing man-on-man, guys? Commie, start with you, and then Razor, you can even chime in as a goalie.
Razor will be able to break this down better than I can, but I'll just put it from my perspective. If I was a defensive defenseman that wasn't a great skater. To me, thinking about, I always kind of like to break the D zone down in zones, kind of okay, I'm taking care of this area, blah, blah, blah. And to me, being on one guy and running around and, you end up running all over to me, that doesn't make, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And like I said, I tried bringing it up with Rod, and he looked at me like I had 6 heads. And I'm just like, you know what? I'm just going to shut up here because he does not need advice on coaching from Mike Commodore, who's never coached a day in his life. But to me, it's just too much running around. And I don't know. I just feel like you can get lost. Razor can break it down better than I can.
Well, I guess the easiest, simplest way, especially watching Florida, is when Aaron Ekblad comes down the wall and pinches. Now you've got a right winger in front of your net playing defense. Right wingers aren't good in front of their net playing defense, and probably have a defenseman like Mike Commodore, who was a defensive defenseman, up at the top of the slot covering his right winger, which is not very favorable for him in that situation. So there's just too many moving parts, and all it takes is one breakdown. When you're playing a layered system, or you're playing a zone system, or you play where a center goes man on man and the rest of the 4 stay in their quadrants, there's 2 or 3 layers. So you have to get through 2 or 3 different mistakes to get a good chance on net. It's the simplest way to put it. Of course, there's more nuance to that, but it's just really hard. It's really, really effort centric, and against a team like Florida who can match the effort, it's it's next to impossible.
My last thing on the
Pretty
Canes,
crazy.
like at the end of the day, even more than maybe or just as much as, I'm not going to sit here and question Rod, but we just kind of touched on it a little bit. The Canes are big on their GM is a scientist who went to Duke, and he's an analytics guy. And I'm not sitting here. I think analytics has a ton of value. I don't really understand it, but I get it. Like, I understand you should be looking at it, but at the end of, I would say the most disappointing thing for me watching them is like they're getting bullied, like shoved around, and like I think there needs to be some changes in the roster. Like I said, I'm not talking about like fighting or anything like that. I understand the game has changed to a point and all that, and it's the playoffs, but like just getting shoved around, bullied, and just no response, like literally nothing. Like the game is over and you're getting pushed around. It's like two-hand somebody or something. I don't know how much grit shows up in analytics. How about that? That would be the best way for me to put it. The scientist from Duke needs to come up with an analytic that like measures grit, and they need to get that somehow. A little bit of that on their team would be my best way of kind of putting it.
Yeah, you can still see that there's still evidence that a heavy game is necessary in order to win, and that's been evident for the last half decade at least. When you look at the Panthers are a game away. Well, yeah, and even in this new game where you got to skate, right, and skate and skill and all of it, but the Panthers are a game away from their third straight Stanley Cup final appearance, and that's a team that plays heavy, right? Vegas, heavy.
Yep.
The Tampa Bay Lightning with all that skill still had a heavy game component to it. The Kings teams that won a couple of Stanley Cups in the last 10 years. Again, there was some weight to those games. So there you go. I think you're spot on with that one, Commie. By the way, Carolina plus 13,000 if you think they've got a shot to
lots of value there. Lots of value there.
Panthers minus 5,000, and in the West right now, Oilers minus 360 to get on to another repeat performance in the Stanley Cup final. And the Stars, if you still believe with that roster, that's a pretty good one. They pay plus 280 right now. So, they got to win. They got to win 3. But it's not bad odds. All right, we're going to break things down the stretch here with Don't Puck It Up, a couple of other ones. We've heard Commie's Don't Puck It Up.
Yeah, I got it out of the way.
And I go. Find out next, right here on the Clearing the Crease podcast. All right, Razor, don't puck it up. Who's not pucking it up here this time?
I'm Toronto Maple Leafs. We just touched on the bullying. We touched on the physicality. We touched on the fact that the Florida Panthers are really good. The Toronto Maple Leafs I'm very bullish on the Toronto Maple Leafs after the letting go of the Shanna plan, Brendan Shanahan, having another friend of the show, Brad Treliving, Craig Berube in charge hockey-wise. Keith Pelly seems to be turning it over to them. And watching how close the Toronto Maple Leafs were against this Florida Panther team, taking them to 7 games. Of course, 5-7 didn't go the way they wanted it to. They're not far away. And I think you look at that bullying side of things, what Florida's doing, that little bit of extra grit, Commie, you're talking about from Carolina, the analytics can't find. There's a couple guys that the Toronto Maple Leafs can pick up in free agency that change that instantly, flip that instantly, whether it's a Brad Marchand, whether it's a Sam Bennett. Unload the bank on one of those two guys, flip that culture just a little bit from Florida to Toronto. I'm really bullish on the way Toronto is going to have an offseason, have these two hockey guys. Berube knows exactly what they need to do. I look to them making a big push next season, probably without Mitch Marner. So the Leafs, don't puck up your offseason. Be ready to cook next April.
I like that.
I love it.
I like that.
I love the idea of that. Hey, real quick, do you guys like the idea of the Leafs not replacing Shanahan?
Yes, I do. Yeah. I mean, it seems perfect. It seemed that one little level where because he has ideas. He's a hockey guy. So instead of something going right from Treliving, who obviously we know is extremely knowledgeable, have ideas, instead of having him go to Brendan Shanahan and then the board, now he goes right to the board. It's just one less cook in the kitchen that can – it's just hard to build teams, especially now, and Keith Pelly made it very clear that Craig Berube was going to be involved in these decisions. So now instead of having 3 guys, You have two that are on one page. And it just seems like you're going to get decisions made a little bit more concisely, more efficiently. And that should be good for Leafs fans. It should be good for Kurtis from Alberta. He should be excited.
Kurtis should be pumped.
Commie's new best friend.
My new best buddy.
Okay. You know what? Normally it's don't puck it up. I'm going to say this, and I'm going to look at the province of Quebec, and I'm going to say, you pucked it up. Rocket Richard finally named a historical figure over the weekend. Yes, the province of Quebec naming Maurice Rocket Richard, one of the most iconic players in the history of the sport of hockey, has been officially named a historical figure. My issue with this is, how did it take so freaking long to be recognized as a historical figure? Rocket Richard has passed away a quarter of a century ago. But you know what I knew as a kid born in the 70s? Rocket Richard was a historical figure. And that was in the 70s and in the 80s. I mean, this guy was everywhere. When you think about the impact that this guy has had on the sport of hockey, this guy was Babe Ruth, right? Listening to the radio and the impact that Rocket Richard had. Montreal had a riot when that guy was suspended, right? We all know the story about him scoring 5 goals after moving furniture all day. This guy was a national treasure, never mind just the province of Quebec, and you waited 25 years after he died to name him a historical figure? You pucked it up, Quebec. Come on.
5 goals after moving
Razor, you were a
furniture
Montreal
all day.
Canadiens fan as a kid.
They lit a fire in the Forum for the guy.
Right?
I mean, that night he should have got this historical plaque. That night it should have been the plaque should have been done. All right, move on. Great job, CBall. I love it.
Politicians, CBall, they puck everything up.
Yeah.
Yeah, vote Cybulski. There you go. There's the answer. On that note, we're going to bring this edition of the Clearing the Crease podcast, powered by BODOG, to a close. A quick reminder, if you're watching here on YouTube, we thank you very much, but don't forget, every episode is now available on Apple Podcasts and also on Spotify. And if you check them out, don't forget to leave a 5-star review, because that's how we roll. We'll see you next week right here on the Clearing the Crease podcast, powered by BODOG.